Well, how's the big guy going to feel about this? The Washington Post today reporting the feds have the goods to charge Hunter Biden with several crimes. And now the decision lies with the Attorney General of the president's home state of Delaware, the U.S. Attorney. And this case could lead all the way to the big White House. According to the report, investigators have, quote, sufficient evidence to slap Hunter with several charges. We're told it is related to tax crimes and a false statement on a gun purchase. The Post claims the investigation has been underway for years, reportedly started with Hunter's overseas business dealings, you know, the seemingly corrupt stuff in China and Ukraine and God knows where else. It then developed into a potential tax fraud case, and now into whether Hunter also lied about buying a gun. I didn't take any drugs. I mean, I was on crack the whole year. That's pretty much the gist of it. Earlier today, Hunter's attorneys releasing a statement trying to defend their clients by blaming investigators. The statement reads in part, quote, "It is a federal felony for a federal agent to leak information about a grand jury investigation such as this one. Any agent you can cite as a source in your article apparently has committed such a felony. We expect the Department of Justice will diligently investigate and prosecute such bad actors," end quote. Listen, we all know Hunter is shadier than a beach umbrella, but what we don't know is how involved his father, the President of the United States, Joseph R. Biden, might be in all this. Remember, the president has been denying everything about Hunter for a long, long time. Watch.
How many times have you ever spoken to your son about his overseas business dealings?
I've never spoken to my son about his overseas business dealings. I have never discussed with my son or my brother or anyone else anything having to do with their businesses, period.
Do you think it was wrong for him to take that position?
No.
Knowing that it was really because that company wanted access to you?
Well, that's not true. You're saying things you do not know what you're talking about. No one said that. Who said that?
Your son and a bunch of other people and Bob Alinsky. It is important to remember the liberal media and big tech have long been covering for the president and his son. Remember when Twitter censored the New York Post laptop story right before the 2020 election? Might have been nice to truthfully inform voters. Is Hunter in too deep to get a bailout this time? Let's get into it with our Thursday night party panel. We've got attorney and author of How to Become a Federal Criminal, Mike Chase, is here. It means we're playing Kennedy's Court later. We've also got stand-up comic and radio personality, actually a superstar, Allie Breen is back in action, and host of the Part of the Problem podcast. You clamor for him. He's in studio. Dave Smith is here. Welcome, everyone. Great to see you.
Hello.
All right, so I want to start with you. What charges could Hunter Biden possibly be looking at, and how serious is it?
Right now, the feds are supposedly leaking information about two of the dumbest crimes, like tax evasion and lying about a straw purchase on or not a straw purchase, using controlled substances while owning a gun. He basically said on a gun form, "I'm not an unlawful user of drugs."
While on crack.
Right, but that's one of the dumbest crimes. I mean, that's one of the reasons that, like, if you use marijuana, you're technically prohibited from owning a firearm in the United States. So that's sort of a dumb crime. I think that one of the more meaningful things behind all of this is that you've got, why are these agents leaking this information to the news? It is likely because they're getting resistance from the U.S. attorneys that are supposed to be prosecuting this crime.
Interesting.
And so that's usually when you see this information come out. So I suspect that there's a lot more there, and that this leak is the tip of the iceberg, but what this is being done to do is sort of coax those U.S. attorneys into actually bringing charges.
So do you think, where is this political? Do you think, to Mike's point, these are a bunch of Republican prosecutors and agents who are really sick of, the progressives in government right now trying to keep law enforcement down? Or is this Merrick Garland telling everybody, basically stand down? We're not moving forward with this.
I think if you look at the reporting, they try to make it really political. They try to say it's a Trump-appointed prosecutor and it's all coming from Trump. And all these publications just need to get Trump's name in there constantly, whether it's about him or not, And it's not. It's actually the federal government found these charges. They found him probably guilty of many other things. And, it's not saying he's a crackhead. Yeah, of course he lied about a bunch of stuff. What's surprising is that he didn't show up naked with a feather boa to sign the paperwork.
He might have. We actually don't have pictures from the gun dealership, but in my Libertaria, Dave Smith, that would be allowed. Thank you.
All the guns and drugs you want.
That's right. As long as you're being a responsible person, not hurting people, not taking their stuff. He was taking stuff, though. He was being an irresponsible person. What are the chances that Hunter Biden gets popped? Remember, nobody F's with a Biden.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess the thing that's interesting, right, so I think that what you put forward is an interesting theory, that it could be that there are agents that are upset that this isn't moving forward. The other possibility, which is a real possibility here, is that this is a political leak of a different kind, which is these are people who have been protecting Joe Biden, who kind of carried him all the way to this point. He just said he's seeking re-election. And right after that, we're seeing this like, okay, well, look, maybe a hint here. We don't have to protect your son. Because I think there's a lot of people in the Democratic establishment who are a little bit concerned with the fact that their candidate is very unpopular and is clearly borderline senile. So what exactly is going on behind the scenes here, I'm not sure. The more interesting political story of all of this, and the reason why it was so messed up that the big tech and the corporate press censored this story to begin with, is that the real scandal, while not actually illegal, is that, of course, all of these foreign countries were buying influence in hiring this crackhead to be on their advisory boards.
I mean, it's no different than the Clinton Foundation. They were doing the exact same thing before.
And particularly with the Burisma company, because it's related to the biggest threat in the world right now, which is the nuclear conflict between the United States and Russia. This was after Joe Biden's government led a coup in Ukraine in 2014. Burisma, who was in with the previous government, admitted through their actions what they were doing. Why didn't they just go bribe the new Ukrainian government? They went right to the source, the United States of America. That's why Russia takes it as an attack from America when they're fighting Ukraine, and that's why even Zelensky is on TV saying, "Hey, America, bomb these guys."
Because we don't talk enough about the fact that Hunter Biden was involved not only with Ukraine, but energy. And that's what this war is about. You know, that's why we are in the situation that we are in. It's because of that part of the world and that very thing in the part of the world. And Hunter Biden was one of the few people who was able to knit the two together, and it's the devil's scarf. Meanwhile, Hunter's dad has some big problems related to all of this of his own. The White House scrambling to find alternative sources of oil after OPEC's decision to cut production by 2 million barrels a day. Thanks, guys. Jerks. Since the Saudis flipped us, the royal bird, the president reportedly turning south to a different dictatorship. Venezuela.
What's your reaction to the OPEC Plus decision?
Disappointment, and we're looking at what alternatives we may have.
Venezuela, one of those alternatives?
There's a lot of alternatives. We haven't made up our mind yet.
According to a report from the Wall Street Journal, the Biden administration is in talks with the Maduro regime to potentially ease sanctions and increase oil production. In other words, President Biden apparently more willing to work with disgusting dictators than becoming energy independent here in this country. So what about drill, baby, drill right here at home? What about nuclear? Mike?
Nuclear, I know how to pronounce, and that's about it. I mean, look, that is a good point, because nuclear is widely regarded by thinking people as an actual solution to an energy crisis, right? And it's something that could generate sufficient energy. I think that when we're talking about
it's clean, it's cheap, it's abundant.
It's abundant, and you know, we're talking about influence. This is influence of a different kind. This is like influence by ineptitude, because by ceding our energy independence to the world, right? You've given over all this power to OPEC, to these cartel oil companies. And I think what the big problem there is that you've given all of this power to countries like Venezuela. They have you over a barrel, no pun intended.
But pun intended as well.
But also pun intended, because what can effectively happen is now Biden has to go hat in hand to authoritarian regimes. We're now doing prisoner swaps, all because we're begging for oil, when this would not happen in an energy independent country. And so that's the unforced error that we have. We also have a Congress that's sort of been unwilling to date to impose any kind of available sanctions on OPEC for this cartel behavior. Now, there's maybe some movement in Congress for antitrust sanctions.
I don't know that sanctions necessarily work, and I'll get into that with you in just a little bit. But I do think there is something to the idea of swapping prisoners. I think that's really hot. But why, if we do need a ramp in order to have completely clean technologies, why not build that ramp here? That's the thing I don't understand. Why not get the government out of the way so energy companies in this country can innovate and come up with new ways of finding what we need right now.
Yeah, that's what needs to happen. I mean, Biden won't address that it's his policies that have created this situation. You know, he wants to play the blame game. It's, Russia, it's OPEC, it's big oil companies. It's like O.J. Simpson looking for the real killer. It's you. You're the one who caused this. We need to start working, inside the U.S. to solve these problems. And we are good producers. We produce them clean. We're, more efficient. Instead of, begging our enemies to go overcharge us for the same amount of fossil fuel that we already use.
Yes,
we're not cutting consumption.
Instead of punishing and demonizing, smart people and good companies and capitalism, which has a tendency to solve problems like this, but what doesn't solve problems, and reading through some of the details of what's going on with Venezuela, and they're like, well, now the president's going to buckle and give him medicine. It's like, why weren't we giving them medicine in the first place? A lot of times in a lot of parts of the world, whether it's North Korea or Iran or Venezuela, sanctions don't work.
I'd go beyond that. I mean, I don't think there's one example of them ever working. I mean, they've impoverished countries before. Then sometimes they backfire, like the ones we have on Russia right now, which actually seem to be enriching them more than they would have been. But the stated purpose of sanctions is always that we will put so much pressure on the people that they will then overthrow that regime. I don't think there's one example of that ever actually working. Look at Cuba, look at North Korea, look at Iran, all the countries we have these serious sanctions against. That never happens. Look, we've helped the Saudis for 8 years fight a war of genocide against the innocent people of Yemen, hundreds of thousands of people dead, and what do we get for it?
Yeah, those are our weapon systems.
What do we get for it? Nothing. But really, if you think about it, it's an unfair ask. This was one of the stated grievances of Osama bin Laden, actually, if you remember. It was like killing innocent Muslims, the bases in the Arabian Peninsula, propping up Israel, and then the other one was that we demand that they artificially reduce the price of oil to help our economy at their expense. I mean, why do we have a right to do that? This whole thing is stupid. There's no, and to all the points you guys were making before. Look, I'll go even further and say this whole climate change extremism is stupid. It's not a real problem. And you know what? If you don't get China and India on board,
it's
none of it's a solution.
Meaningless.
And they're not on board. So it has absolutely no impact on global temperatures over the next 100 years.
It's like,
if we just produce energy here and not just nuclear,
it's like
we should
trying
get
to
fossil
get
fuels.
pregnant with a vibrator.
This is right. It's not happening. This is all a very good analogy that really brings up an image. But yeah, I mean,
but
it's
not a baby.
This is the truth is that fossil fuels, as opposed to what the progressives will tell you, are the greatest thing in the world. The greatest thing in the world.
Brought to you by Vaseline. Dave Smith.
If you're on team human beings, over the last 30 years, 1 billion people have been pulled out of extreme poverty because they started burning more fossil fuels.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, but now our fossil fuels are cleaner. And they power our cars and light our homes, and they cannot power electric vehicles in the state of California. They can't do it.
Go ask Germany this winter how they feel about fossil fuels.
They were like, oh, I wish we had more nuclear. Panel, please don't go anywhere. Coming up, we are playing Kennedy's Court. It is on, and you are part of history. First up, Homeland Security Secretary.